Hey guys, tonight we're not drifting into some cozy medieval castle or sunny Roman villa. No, tonight you're stepping into the kind of story that will freeze your eyebrows solid. We're heading north, really far north, into the Arctic, where German mountain troops, the Gebirgsjäger, learned the hard way how to sleep when the world itself felt like an icebox. Think white silence, think breath instantly turning into clouds, and think about how quickly frostbite can nibble at your fingers if you pause too long. And just a little warning, if you imagine yourself in their boots, well, let's be honest, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I don't want sympathy subs, I want people who actually love a little history as their lullaby. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time down in the comments. It always amazes me how many of you tune in from every corner of the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge forward through snow that swallows your calves with each step. Northern Norway, 1942, is no place for daydreamers. The boots you wear, though thick leather and wool-lined, feel more like thin slippers against this Arctic frost. Around you march other Gebirgsjäger mountain troops who thought their training in the Alps had prepared them. But the Alps never kept daylight hostage for weeks at a time. And the Alps never punished men with winds sharp enough to make your teeth ache through closed lips. The officers bark quietly, conserving energy. Every sound feels muffled, eaten by snowflakes that never stop falling. Your pack is heavy rifle ammunition, rations, and, tucked into the side pocket, a rolled-up reindeer skin bag that looks more like something dragged from a museum than military gear. It's ironic, the most advanced army in Europe is relying on the techniques of nomadic reindeer herders to keep its men alive. The first shock comes not from the cold, but from the endlessness. You expect night to pass, but here in the Arctic winter, darkness lingers for weeks. When the sun does creep over the horizon, it hangs low, painting the world in pale blue light that never quite feels warm. Men squint at their watches, confused that it's midday when the sky looks like perpetual dawn. Historians still argue whether these troops ever truly adjusted to polar night, or whether they simply endured, day after day, through a twilight that messed with body clocks as much as with morale. Your breath steams upward, frosting the edges of your scarf. Each exhale crystallizes instantly, dusting your eyelashes with tiny flakes. Someone jokes that you all look like frozen opera singers, but nobody laughs too loudly. The humor is brittle, a defense against the gnawing awareness that this march isn't just a test of endurance, it's survival theater, staged against a white backdrop where the set designers forgot to add exits. The snow squeaks underfoot, a sound unique to these conditions, high-pitched and strange, as if the earth itself is complaining with every step. And the loads feel heavier because the snow resists, shoving back against your shins. At intervals, officers call halts, letting men squat in the drifts, rifles laid across their knees, steam rising from soaked uniforms. But rest offers no comfort here. Sit too long and the cold creeps inside, wrapping itself around your bones like an unwanted blanket. Some of the men, veterans from the Eastern Front, whisper comparisons. At least here, we're not dodging Soviet shells, one mutters. True, another replies, but in Russia, you could at least see the sky. There's a grim humor in that. In war, comfort becomes relative, trading artillery for darkness, mud for ice. The deeper you go into the Norwegian mountains, the more the landscape itself seems to sneer. Jagged peaks rise in silence, their black ridges lined with hard snow like razorbacks on the spine of the earth. Fjords stretch beneath them, slabs of water turn to ice, reflecting moonlight when the clouds part. This land is beautiful in a cruel way, like an oil painting designed to remind humans they are fragile. You clutch the strap of your rifle tighter. Fingers ache, even inside wool gloves. Someone ahead stumbles, sinking to his knees, and to comrades, haul him up before frost has the chance to steal away his will. In these latitudes, pausing too long can be as dangerous as enemy fire. And yet here's the quirky twist: local villagers sometimes step outside in lighter clothing than your entire regiment wears, as if the weather were only a mild inconvenience. Old Sami herders trudge past in fur boots, pulling sleds with calm reindeer, their faces relaxed. One even waves, offering what looks like a faint smirk. It's humiliating, almost comical. These soldiers, with their disciplined formations and polished rifles, look less prepared for the Arctic than people who've lived here for centuries with nothing more than skins and instinct. The officers know it, too. Orders have already filtered down. You'll need to learn from the locals. Dig snow pits, carve igloos, line sleeping bags with reindeer hides. The lessons sound almost childish, like something out of a survival manual for Boy Scouts. But you quickly realize there's nothing childish about surviving in a land where steel freezes faster than bread. Your stomach growls. Rations taste of metal and salt, and worse, they're frozen solid. The tins needing to be thawed near body heat before a fork can scrape inside. One soldier sticks a sardine tin in his armpit as he marches, joking that it's like carrying a pet mouse. He'll be disappointed later, of course, when the tin warms just enough to open, but the fish inside are still icy and stiff. Snow continues to fall. It piles on your helmet, slides down your collar, and crusts on your pack straps until you feel like a walking snowman in camouflage green. The Gebirgsjäger pride themselves on toughness, but even they mutter curses under their breath. The worst isn't the cold itself, but its persistence. You realize there's no escaping it, not for days, not for weeks. Only learning how to live inside it, how to use snow not as an enemy but as a shield, will keep you breathing. And so you march through valleys carved by glaciers, across frozen rivers where ice groans beneath heavy boots, and up ridges where winds punch straight through every layer of clothing. Behind you, your footprints stretch endlessly, swallowed by gusts of snow. Ahead of you, more white, more silence, more tests of will. At some point, you stop thinking in miles. You measure progress by body temperature, by the stiffness of your toes, by the rare reward of feeling your fingers again when circulation returns. Every step becomes a quiet bargain. One more stride, one more breath, one more moment closer to whatever shelter waits at the end of the march. The strangest thing about the Arctic isn't the cold, it's the way time slips away when the sun disappears. You step outside your snow-crusted igloo at what your watch insists is noon, but the sky looks like perpetual midnight. The stars hang low, the moon seems brighter than logic allows, and sometimes a faint green curtain of aurora stirs above, like the heavens are brushing dust off their shoulders. It's unsettling, beautiful, and deeply disorienting. Your body still craves light. Each morning, or what you call morning, you half expect golden rays to break across the mountains. Instead, there's only a dull glow, like someone left a candle flickering miles beneath the horizon. The officers say this is polar night, and they try to keep schedules strict. Wake at this hour, drill at that, eat at another, so Men don't lose all sense of routine, but secretly, everyone knows the watches matter more than the sky. Without those ticking hands, you'd never know if you were supposed to march, eat, or try to sleep. The lack of daylight plays tricks on your mind. Some soldiers swear their dreams bleed into waking hours, that they hear phantom bugles or see flickers of dawn that vanish as soon as they blink. One man insists he dreamed he was back in Bavaria, only to wake still wrapped in reindeer skins, frost edging his eyebrows. The boundaries blur. Historians still debate whether prolonged polar darkness caused genuine psychological strain, or whether it was simply another layer of discomfort lumped on an already exhausting campaign. Maybe both. You stumble across a quirky detail every few nights, men trying to track the day by melting snow in tin cups. The theory goes that if water freezes again before you've swallowed it, it must be late night. It's nonsense, of course, but in this place, nonsense feels like wisdom. When the world stops offering clues, even half-baked science becomes gospel. Inside the huts and igloos, the atmosphere turns oddly domestic. A stubby candle or oil lamp becomes the center of gravity, casting shadows that lurch across icy walls. Someone might play with the flame, tipping it back and forth like a tiny sun. It's silly, but the ritual calms men who haven't seen real daylight in weeks. In whispers, some even name their candles. One soldier swears his stub, Otto, gives him better luck when standing watch. Another argues that if you let your candle die too quickly, it curses your dreams. Still, discipline holds. The Gebirgsjäger are mountain troops, after all, used to hardship. Officers keep routines sharp, ordering drills under lantern light, insisting rifles be cleaned even when fingers barely bend in the cold. You find yourself standing in formation at morning, lamps swinging above like ghostly suns. Commands echo across the snow, boots stamp, rifles snap upward. All the while, stars glitter above as if mocking the whole performance. And yet amid this strangeness, moments of beauty sneak through. On one watch, as you rub warmth into stiff hands, the aurora bursts wide across the sky, bands of green and purple weaving like silk. The whole squad pauses, discipline forgotten, staring up with open mouths. Nobody speaks. Even war, for a breath, feels like it belongs to another world. Then, the cold reminds you it doesn't care for beauty. A blast of wind slices down the valley, candles gutter, and the aurora becomes just another distraction against the endless fight to stay warm. You pull your scarf tighter, knowing that in this land, light is borrowed, fleeting, and never enough. Sleep comes strangely here. Without the sun, you never feel sure if your eyes should close. Some men collapse into their reindeer skins at odd hours, snoring while others eat. Laughter sometimes ripples when three men are clearly dreaming in the middle of what should be afternoon. You try to hold out, to follow the clock's stubborn ticking, but often you drift anyway, lulled by the absence of time itself. One night, you catch yourself asking silently, "How long have we been here?" Days blur into weeks. The snow is always the same, the darkness unbroken, and the cold a constant background hum. You realize you've stopped counting. Maybe that's what the Arctic wants for you, to forget where you came from, who you are, until only the snow remains. Snow, the very thing that threatens to swallow you whole, slowly reveals itself as an ally. At first, you treat it as the enemy. It soaks your boots, blinds your eyes, and buries your gear if you let it. But then a sergeant, the kind with crow's feet frozen permanently into his eyes, gathers you and the others around. He digs his glove deep into a bank, packs a ball, and tosses it into the air. "Hard snow," he says simply. "Hard snow saves your life." It sounds absurd. Snow, this powder, falling endlessly from the sky. Yet, as you watch, he chips into the drift, carving a hollow with practiced strokes of his spade. He crawls inside, leaving only boots sticking out. Moments later, he calls from the darkness. "Warmer in here than outside." You and the others laugh. How could a cave of frozen water be warmer? But curiosity drives you to crawl in after him. And sure enough, the wind dies, the noise dulls, and the air feels bearable. Not warm, but not the knife-sharp freeze that stabs your cheeks outside. Snow, it turns out, is insulation. Dense layers trap heat, hold it close, and shield you from the Arctic's cruelest edge. Historians still argue about how much credit belongs to the Sami and other northern peoples for teaching these tricks to soldiers. Some say the Gebirgsjäger had manuals ready, prepared by German researchers fascinated by polar expeditions of the 1930s. Others insist the men learned almost everything from locals who chuckled at their struggles. What seems certain is that, without this knowledge, many soldiers might never have survived the first winter in northern Norway. The quirky part: once the idea caught on, soldiers started competing to see who could make the most elaborate snow shelters. A simple hollow turned into tunnels connecting small rooms. Some even carved little niches for candles or stacked snow benches along the walls. One man bragged that he had a bedroom and a kitchen, though both looked suspiciously identical holes in the same drift with empty sardine tins scattered about. And you learn quickly. The shovel becomes your most precious tool, even more than the rifle slung across your back. With each thrust, you carve blocks of snow, stacking them like bricks. At first, they crumble, collapsing into messy piles that soak your gloves. But practice teaches you to cut clean edges, to tilt each block slightly inward so gravity presses them together. The dome begins to curve, the walls rising until finally they meet overhead. The first time you sit inside your own snow shelter, the satisfaction rivals firing a perfect shot on the range. There's a hush inside that no barracks could match. The storm outside becomes a muffled whisper. Your breath fogs, clinging to icy walls in tiny beads that glitter like diamonds in candlelight. You wiggle fingers that only minutes earlier felt numb. It's a strange comfort, knowing the very thing you cursed snow is now a cocoon, wrapping you in silence. But don't think it's all smooth progress. Trial and error rules the night. One unlucky group builds a roof too thin, only to have it collapse mid-slumber, dumping powder across their faces. Another digs too deep, and water seeps in from below, soaking everything. Laughter mixes with curses, echoing through the camp as men stagger out, covered head to toe in snow, looking like walking ghosts. The officers, surprisingly, tolerate this. They know the experiments keep spirits alive, and besides, each failure teaches something new. Soon, men know how to angle walls against wind, how to carve vents so smoke from tiny stoves won't suffocate them, how to line the floor with branches before spreading reindeer skins. The igloo becomes more than a novelty, it becomes the soldier's true barracks, hidden in plain sight under drifts of endless white. You sit inside with 3 comrades, a stub of candle flickering between you. The flame bends in the tiny vent, its smoke curling upward. The air feels thick with the scent of wax and wool, but it's tolerable, even comfortable. Someone jokes that it's war's coziest hotel room. Another adds, if only room service delivered beer. For a moment, laughter fills the dome, warming it more than the candle ever could. Out beyond the igloos, the camp transforms. From above, it might look like nothing more than smooth snowfields, silent and empty. But beneath those mounds lie dozens of men, snoring, whispering, or simply staring at frozen ceilings. It's like a hidden city, a winter warren dug by soldiers instead of animals. Quirky details multiply. Some men decorate their shelters with twigs or carve little initials into the walls. Others stash ration tins on ledges, claiming it keeps them from freezing solid. One soldier even carves a crude chessboard into the ice floor, using buttons and pebbles as pieces. In war, comfort isn't about luxury, it's about distraction, about tricking the mind into thinking life holds something normal amid the absurd. As you lie back in your reindeer skin bag, the cold finally feels manageable. Not gone, never gone, but softened. You marvel at how quickly humans adapt. A week ago you dreaded the snow. Now you shape it like clay, bending it to your will. It's still a hostile land, but with each block you carve, you feel less like prey and more like a guest learning the local rules. And the truth is, this ingenuity doesn't just keep you alive, it helps the whole unit function. Sleep comes easier, food thaws faster, and morale, though brittle, holds steady. Snow, once feared, becomes a partner in survival. You begin to wonder what else this frozen wilderness might teach you. What other secrets lie hidden in the endless white? The first time you dig a tunnel into the snow, you're not sure whether you're building a shelter or a grave. The walls close in quickly, and every scrape of your shovel echoes like thunder in your ears. You have to remind yourself to breathe slowly, because inside a tunnel only a few feet wide, your own breath feels like it's stealing all the air. But there's a strange rhythm to it. Scrape, scoop, push the powder back toward your comrade who shoves it out with his boots. Scrape, scoop, push again. The snow resists at first, packed hard as stone, but gradually it yields. A small hollow opens, then grows wider, and you realize you're carving out a space where cold won't dominate every inch of your body. The sergeant insists that snow tunnels make better shelters than flimsy tents. A tent flaps, rips, and radiates cold. A tunnel, once reinforced with blocks and smoothed walls, holds steady. You hear his voice echoing down the passage. Think of it like a house underground, only instead of dirt, we live in snow. His words sound ridiculous, but as you crawl inside the hollow you've made, they start to ring true. At first, claustrophobia gnaws at you. The roof hovers a hand's width above your helmet. Your knees brush walls as you shuffle forward. You imagine tons of snow ready to collapse. But then the quiet settles, soft as a blanket. The howl of the wind fades. Your candle flickers bravely, casting a golden glow over surfaces that sparkle with tiny crystals. It's not spacious, but it feels safe. There's an unexpected coziness in these tight burrows. The air, though cold, doesn't slice your lungs the way the open wind does. With 2 or 3 men packed close, the combined warmth becomes noticeable. Soon you're sweating beneath layers, pulling your scarf loose. The irony makes you smile, out in the Arctic, freezing in broad daylight. Underground in snow, warming as though nature itself has decided to spare you. Of course, accidents happen. One night, a soldier digs too high, and his tunnel caves in, burying him in powder. For a terrifying moment, only his boots stick out. Men rush to haul him free, coughing, blinking snow from his eyelashes. He sputters angrily, but by morning he's telling the story himself with exaggerated flair, acting like he wrestled a polar bear underground. Jokes become survival currency. In places like this, laughter is nearly as essential as fire. Quirky habits develop quickly. Some soldiers carve shelves into their tunnel walls, lining them with ration tins or stray cartridges. Others poke small holes overhead, pretending they're windows for ventilation. One man cuts a neat circle and calls it his chimney, boasting that smoke from his tin can stove escapes just like a proper house. Another cuts a niche just big enough to set his helmet, claiming it's his bedside table. War transforms ordinary men into comedians, carpenters, and architects all at once. Historians still debate whether these tunnels were more psychological than practical. Did they truly keep soldiers warmer, or did they simply give the illusion of comfort? The truth may lie somewhere between. Measurements show snow's insulating power is relit, keeps temperatures stable, hovering near freezing even when outside plummets far below. But the greater gift may have been the morale. Inside those tunnels, men felt they had carved out a private space, an act of control in a landscape designed to strip all control away. There's another lesson you learn. Silence has a sound. Inside a snow tunnel, the world narrows. Your own heartbeat becomes a drum. The shift of your body creaks against frozen walls. You hear tiny drips of meltwater like distant clocks. One night you even swear you hear the snow itself sighing as it settles. It's eerie, but strangely calming, as if the earth is breathing along with you. And though you miss the stars, you don't miss the wind. That biting gale that finds every gap in your coat is gone down here. You can finally unbutton your tunic, loosen your boots, and stretch without shivering violently. Sleep comes easier. You curl into your reindeer skin bag, the fur soft against your cheeks, and listen to the muffled world outside. Above, snow piles higher with each storm, but instead of dread, you feel relief, knowing every flake is another layer of insulation. One soldier starts calling his tunnel the opera house. Why? Because he snores so loudly that others swear it's like a baritone echoing down a concert hall. Another names his the Ritz, despite sleeping on nothing but pine boughs and damp wool. Humor keeps the frost at bay as much as engineering does. There's also a certain childlike wonder in the work. You remember building forts out of blankets as a kid, little secret hideouts where the world couldn't reach you. These tunnels carry a similar magic, though sharpened by necessity. Grown men crawl inside, grin at their craftsmanship, and forget for a moment that rifles and war wait just beyond the walls. One evening, as you sit with comrades, someone mutters that if the Soviets ever find them, they'll be buried alive. The thought chills everyone for a moment, but then another soldier shrugs. Better than freezing standing up. Grim logic. But in this place, it makes sense. Outside, the Arctic rages. Blizzards tear across valleys, winds scream like banshees, and ice crusts on rifles. Yet down in the tunnels, a fragile peace holds. Men sleep, eat, even write letters by candlelight, their words curling awkwardly as pens freeze mid-stroke. You scrawl your own note to family, pressing harder to keep ink flowing. Somewhere miles away, that letter might reach a warm kitchen. You wonder if anyone there could imagine that it was written inside a hollow doubt. Drift dot when morning comes o'er. What passes for morning you crawl back into the open. The cold slams you like a wall, reminding you that the tunnels are not luxury, just reprieve. But still, the lesson is clear. In the Arctic, survival isn't about fighting the environment. It's about borrowing its strength, hiding within it, and learning to see the enemy's snow as a friend. By now you've carved a few tunnels, tested their safety, and even started to feel a strange pride in your makeshift architecture. But nothing compares to the first time you build a full igloo. Tunnels are practical, yes, but the dome, that round, white little house of ice, feels like something monumental. It's like taming the Arctic itself, bending snow into a perfect shelter where your breath alone makes the walls glow. It starts with blocks, not haphazard chunks of snow scooped from drifts, but neat slabs cut with spades and knives. The snow here, packed by wind, is dense and brittle, almost like limestone. The trick, the sergeant explains, is to cut each block wide at the base and thinner at the top, so they lean in when stacked. You watch carefully, your gloved hands stiff as he demonstrates, pressing each block at a slight angle, building a spiral that curves naturally into a dome. At first, your efforts collapse in slapstick fashion. You set a block too flat, and the whole wall crumbles, sending a cascade of snow over your boots. Men laugh, and you laugh too, because frustration is lighter when shared. Someone mutters that the Sami make it look so easy, while here it feels like juggling bricks while blindfolded. Still, you keep at it, block by block, leaning them inward, shaping the circle tighter until it closes like the petals of a flower. When the last block, the keystones, slid into place, a hush falls. For a moment, everyone stares upward at the sealed dome, half expecting it to tumble down, but it holds. You duck inside, and suddenly the storm vanishes. The world outside howls, but here it's muffled, a heartbeat behind thick white walls. Your candle flickers to life, and the dome glows like a lantern, every crystal sparkling like frozen stars. The quirky part is how quickly soldiers start competing. Who can make the roundest dome? Who can build the biggest? Some igloos grow tall enough to stand in. Others are tiny cocoons, just big enough to crawl inside. A few soldiers even connect theirs with little tunnels, creating what they proudly call apartments. One man insists his igloo has a foyer, though in reality it's just an extra block cut away at the entrance. There's also a learning curve to decoration. Some carve shelves into the walls, setting ration tins neatly in rows. Others cut small air holes, carefully angled so snowflakes won't drift inside. A few dare to poke sticks into the walls, making hooks for gloves or rifles. Suddenly, you're not just surviving, you're designing. The igloo becomes a canvas, and each soldier an unlikely architect. Historians still debate whether igloos were genuinely more effective than snow tunnels. Some accounts describe them as warmer, easier to maintain, and more comfortable. Others argue that in heavy blizzards, tunnels offered better concealment and stability. Perhaps the truth is that both worked, but igloos carried a special psychological charm. They gave form to the chaos, a visible dome of safety in a land that swallowed landmarks whole. Inside your igloo, warmth is relative. It never becomes cozy in the sense of wool blankets and fireplaces, but compared to the raw wind outside, it's heaven. With 4 men packed close, a candle, and reindeer skins spread across pine boughs, you almost trick yourself into thinking you're snug. Breath rises in tiny clouds, frosting the ceiling until droplets drip down, splashing onto noses. You joke that it's indoor plumbing. Nobody laughs too hard, because laughter shakes the walls. A quirky little fact emerges quickly. If you burn too many candles or light a tiny stove, the snow walls begin to sweat. Water beads trickle down, pooling in corners, making the floor slick. One soldier swears his igloo cried during the night, leaving him soaked. Another says too much heat will cause the dome to collapse, and suddenly debates rage over how many candles equal to many. These debates feel almost comical, yet they show how every detail can mean comfort or disaster. There are also rituals around entrances. Most igloos have a little tunnel mouth, low enough that you must crawl inside. The design is clever. Cold air sinks, so the lower passage keeps the dome warmer. But it also makes for funny scenes: proud German soldiers crawling on all fours like children, dragging rifles and packs behind them. Someone jokes about charging the enemy backwards like igloo crabs, and for a moment the camp shakes with muffled laughter. At night, you lie in your dome, candlelight flickering, listening to the storm outside. The wind wails, but the sound is softened like a distant organ. You shift in your reindeer skin, feeling the fur trap your body heat, and marvel that in a place this harsh, you've created a bubble where sleep is possible. For the first time in weeks, you close your eyes without shivering, but nothing in the Arctic is without tension. You worry the dome could collapse in heavy snowfall, suffocating everyone inside. Some men dig tiny escape holes at the top, just in case. Others refuse, claiming it weakens the structure. Historians still argue whether these precautions were necessary, but in the moment, the fear feels real. You sleep with one hand near your knife, ready to carve your way out should the white ceiling fall. Yet, despite these fears, igloos become treasured havens. They're round, simple, glowing, and profoundly human. In a war of iron tanks and roaring plains, they remind you that survival sometimes rests on ancient tricks, snow blocks, fur skins, and shared warmth. You drift off, listening to the muffled storm, grateful that the snow outside, once an enemy, now holds you safe within its cold embrace. You slide down into your reindeer skin bag after another day of carving snow, and it dawns on you, this pelt, this heavy, musky hide, is the difference between a night of rest and a night of shivering delirium. The Sami had used them for centuries, and the army had the sense to copy them. Without reindeer skin, you wouldn't last long in this polar world. Wool blankets soak and freeze. Canvas stiffens, but fur breathes, insulates, and keeps you alive. The first time you crawl inside, you expect stiffness, maybe itchiness. Instead, you find warmth. Not cozy warmth, but a subtle layer of trapped heat that clings to your skin, slowly seeping into your bones. You pull the flap shut around your neck, and for once, the cold doesn't seep in like an unwelcome guest. You breathe, and the bag breathes back, trapping each exhale, holding it close. The musky scent of animal hair clings to your nose, a smell both strange and reassuring. It's not pleasant, but it signals safety. There's a trick, though. You mustn't sweat. Sweat is the enemy. Too much heat, and your body dampens the fur, which freezes stiff. You learn to regulate. Loosen layers before bed. Shake snow off your boots. Dry socks near the tiny stove before slipping inside. The men develop rituals, each as important as cleaning their rifles. Some hang skins upside down to keep them aired. Others joke about naming theirs. One soldier swears his bag, Greta, warms him more kindly than his wife ever did. You laugh, not because the joke is good, but because laughter itself feels like warmth. Historians still argue whether these reindeer skins were distributed widely by the German army, or whether soldiers scavenged them from locals. Evidence suggests both. Supply chains in the Arctic were notoriously unreliable. Some units received fresh pelts in bundles. Others bartered with Sami herders, or simply took what they could find. Either way, the skins became as prized as rifles. A man with a torn or missing bag looked at his comrades with envy sharper than hunger. Quirky details abound. The fur often shed little hairs that stuck to faces, clinging to nostrils and lips. Soldiers woke, coughing, swatting at phantom whiskers. Some complained the bags smelled of smoke, others of old hay. Yet nobody traded theirs away. No matter how ragged, they were treasures. A man might lend his rifle, but never his skin. At night, when you're wrapped inside, you sometimes forget the war. The bag muffles sound, softens light, and cocoons you in a primitive embrace. You hear the muffled breathing of comrades nearby, their snores blending with the whisper of wind. It feels almost prehistoric, as if you've slipped back into some Ice Age camp, huddled in animal pelts while mammoths roam outside. You chuckle at the thought, then drift into dreams that blur the line between past and present. But not every night is easy. Sometimes moisture creeps in, freezing the fur stiff. You wake stiff as well, bones aching, joints reluctant to move. You pound the pelt against the igloo wall, shaking off frost before crawling back in. The sound echoes like a drum, part of the nightly rhythm of the camp. You start to wonder if the snow listens. One evening, a storm rages so violently outside that the igloo shudders. Snow seeps through cracks, dusting your bag. You curl tighter inside, praying the dome holds. The reindeer skin, damp and heavy, feels like a shield. The storm screams, but you stay alive, breathing inside fur that once walked the tundra. You can't help but think the animal spirit lingers, lending its endurance to yours. Some men decorate their bags, stitching patches of cloth or carving initials into leather straps. Others line them with extra wool, though it rarely helps. One man, inventive to a fault, attempts to sew two together to make a double bag. It works for about a week, until the seams tear under his tossing weight. The camp laughs for days, calling him the Emperor of Skins. Historians debate whether reindeer bags truly kept men warmer than standard issue gear, or if the psychological comfort mattered more. Some argue that warmth is half in the mind believing you are safe, convinces your body to relax. Perhaps that's why these skins became more than tools. They became symbols, wrapped inside. Men imagined themselves hunters, survivors, part of an older lineage that had faced these same snows long before the word war was invented. In daylight tour, what passes for daylight, you drag your pelt outside, draping it over a stick to air. Frost sparkles across the hairs, melting into droplets when the rare sun peeks through clouds. You beat it with your mittened hand, sending ice crystals flying like shattered glass. Nearby, a dozen other skins hang like ghostly figures, flapping in the breeze. The camp looks like a haunted village of frozen reindeer spirits. You smile at the absurdity, because war in the Arctic often feels absurd. Back inside the igloo, you spread your bag across pine branches, smoothing the fur before sliding in. The branches crackle faintly under your weight, releasing a scent of resin. For a moment, you could be in a forest cabin instead of a snow dome. The skin embraces you again, heavy and unyielding. You pull it tight and let the Arctic vanish beyond the walls, wrapped in fur. You realize the harshest enemy here isn't the Soviets or even the blizzards. It's exhaustion. The body can endure cold if the mind is allowed rest. And without these skins, without their borrowed warmth from another life, there would be no rest, only shivering hours strung together into madness. Tonight, though, you sleep. The reindeer skin holds your heat, cradling you against the Arctic's indifference. The war feels distant, the cold manageable, and for a few hours, you remember what it is to be human in a world determined to erase that feeling. The first time someone lights a candle inside an igloo, the whole place changes. You'd think a tiny stub of wax couldn't make much difference in a dome carved out of snow. But the moment the flame catches, the walls come alive. Crystals sparkle like chandelier. The glow softens every shadow. And suddenly, the igloo feels less like a frozen tomb and more like a little chapel. Intimate and strangely peaceful. You sit with 3 comrades, huddled around that flickering light. The air is still cold, but less biting. You can actually feel a few degrees of difference, just enough to keep fingers from stiffening into claws. The sergeant mutters something about heat retention, but the truth is simpler. One flame makes the whole dome feel like a home. There's a quirky charm to candlelight in these shelters. The flame bends in the small draft from the vent, its smoke curling like lazy ghosts. Some men stare at it for hours, hypnotized, as though the candle itself has replaced the sun. One soldier names his stub Hildegard, claiming she's the only woman who followed him into Norway. Another insists his flame predicts the weather. It flickers wildly. A storm is coming. No one laughs too hard, because more often than not, he's right. But candles bring hazards too. Too much heat, and the igloo begins to drip. Tiny droplets form overhead, sliding down walls and splashing onto fur bags. One soldier wakes with icy water dripping on his forehead and swears the igloo is crying over him. Another points out the ceiling sagging where the flame burned too long, and everyone quickly learns. 1 candle is comfort, 2 are disaster. Historians still debate whether these shelters truly offered safe warmth, or whether they were fragile experiments kept standing by luck. Perhaps it was both. At night, the candle becomes a campfire substitute. Men gather in small circles, swapping stories, or quietly smoking, the dome flickering with golden light. Someone sings softly, the notes echoing faintly off icy walls. For a moment, you forget you're soldiers. You're just humans, huddled in a pocket of light against a world of darkness. The war feels impossibly far away. The contrast outside is brutal. Step into the Arctic night, and the cold slams you like a hammer. Stars glare, the wind cuts, and your eyelashes frost instantly. But duck back into your igloo, shut the low entrance, and you return to your glowing cave, where the candle still flickers steadily. It feels like stepping between worlds, one merciless, one forgiving. The quirky details pile up. Wax is scarce, so men stretch it by pushing nails or buttons into melted pools to slow the burn. Others snuff flames early, hoarding stubs like treasure. One soldier even carves a little holder into the wall, declaring his candle shelf a sign of luxury. Another uses soot from the flame to draw crude sketches on the igloo ceiling stick figures. Little mountains, sometimes even caricatures of officers. Nobody reports him. Laughter is too valuable to waste. Some nights you fall asleep with the candle still burning. You wake in dim blue light, wick long gone, a stub of wax hardened into a puddle on the shelf. You sigh, both grateful for the warmth and regretful for the waste. One less candle means one less evening of borrowed sun. There's a debate that never ends. Does the candle actually warm the igloo, or is it just in your head? The officers claim the temperature rises only a few degrees, hardly worth the risk of melting. But you know what you feel. When the flame flickers, your breath doesn't cloud so thickly. Your fingers bend easier, your spirit softens. Maybe warmth is half physical, half psychological. Maybe survival is always a matter of belief. Of course, not all experiments succeed. One soldier, too clever for his own good, tries to light 3 candles at once, boasting that his igloo will be the warmest in Norway. Within an hour, the ceiling sags. Droplets rain down, soaking his bag. By morning, his dome collapses entirely, and he spends the night freezing in a tunnel borrowed from comrades. They nickname him the Sun God, teasing him for weeks. Quirky failures like this become stories, retold whenever the darkness grows too heavy. You notice something else. Candlelight changes dreams. Soldiers swear they sleep more deeply, more vividly, when a flame flickers nearby. Some dream of home, some of endless snowscapes, others of impossible warmth kitchens, stoves, mothers' hands pulling bread from ovens. You, too, dream strange dreams. In one, you walk through a cathedral made of ice, candles lining every wall. The arches glisten, and the silence feels holy. When you wake, you realize the cathedral was just your igloo, magnified by imagination. Historians still puzzle over accounts of such dreams, wondering if polar night induced mild hallucinations, or if soldiers simply clung to light as their last anchor of sanity. But you don't need a historian to explain. You live it. You know the candle isn't just wax and flame, it's a tether, a link between the world you left behind and the frozen wilderness, pressing in on all sides. Tonight, as you watch your stub flicker, you imagine it as a tiny sun. Small, fragile, but enough. You draw your reindeer skin tighter, close your eyes, and let that glow carry you into uneasy but precious sleep. Food, or at least the idea of food. That's what gnaws at you most, once the initial shock of Arctic cold dulls into routine. Your stomach feels like an echo chamber, rumbling in ways that drown out even the wind. The German supply lines creak and stutter under winter's weight, and what arrives at the front often freezes solid before it reaches your hands. You stare down at a sardine tin one evening, the kind stamped with neat lettering that once promised convenience. Now it's a solid brick of fish and oil, locked tight in a metallic coffin. A comrade tucks his into his armpit while marching, letting body heat do what fire cannot. By the time he peels the lid open, the fish inside still crunch with ice. He shrugs and chews anyway, lips cracking, frost mixing with oil. You wince, but follow his lead. Hunger has a way of erasing dignity. Coffee or what passes, for it becomes a battleground. Real beans are rare this far north, so roasted barley or acorns serve as the brew smells like mud and tastes worse, but when it's hot, nobody complains. One morning you cradle a tin mug, steam curling up, and for a brief instant you imagine you're in a cafe back home. The illusion lasts until the liquid cools into sludge, leaving grit on your tongue. Still, men argue fiercely over whose improvised recipe tastes most authentic. Quirky meals appear when rations run thin. Some soldiers chew pine bark, swearing it contains nutrients. Others melt snow into broth and drop in anything edible, bits of bread, stray herbs, even candle drippings if they're desperate. One man, inventive in ways you'd rather not copy, tries boiling his leather belt. The smell alone nearly drives the others from the igloo. Historians still debate how widespread such experiments were, but diaries tell enough. Hunger makes inventors out of everyone, though not always successful ones. And then there's the frozen bread, hard as stone. It must be hacked into with a bayonet or thawed by holding it over a candle. Once softened, it tastes stale, but you chew gratefully. The sound is unmistakable, like biting through wood. Someone jokes that the bread could double as a building material. Another soldier pretends to use his loaf as a hammer. Laughter rattles around the igloo, though nobody dares waste a crumb. The reindeer provide occasional salvation, not only skins for warmth, but meat for sustenance when hunting or trading allows. Fresh venison, sizzling in a tin pan, sends aromas curling through the camp like smoke signals of joy. For one evening, you feast. The fat drips, the meat hisses, and even the most stoic soldiers smile. You close your eyes, chewing slowly, letting the taste remind you that food can be more than survival, it can be pleasure. But such meals are rare, and the memory only sharpens the contrast when you return to frozen tins and stale bread. Quirky rituals grow around meals. Some men tap their frozen cans 3 times before opening, claiming it brings better luck. Others hoard small bits of sugar or chocolate, savoring them in secret while pretending they have nothing left. You learn quickly that sweets are more valuable than ammunition. Morale comes in the form of a single cube of chocolate melting on the tongue at night. The igloos hum with chewing and quiet talk. Men trade rations like children trading cards. I'll give you my sardines for your biscuit, half my sugar for a sip of that ersatz coffee. Deals are struck, disputes settled, and in that moment, food becomes currency. You find yourself haggling over crumbs, as if they were gold. Historians still argue about whether German Arctic units were adequately supplied. Some records suggest the Wehrmacht underestimated the challenges of northern Norway, sending standard rations as if climate made no difference. Others claim special packages, Strei, WG, straw fish, or even schnapps were dispatched northward. The truth may lie somewhere between. You know only what your stomach tells you. Hunger is constant, and creativity is the only relief. One night, you and a comrade share a tin of barley coffee and a frozen biscuit. He breaks his teeth on the first bite, swears, then softens it with steam over the mug. You both laugh, because laughter keeps you from dwelling on how absurd it is to men trained for modern war, reduced to gnawing at bread like cavemen, the quirky detail. Even in misery, men crave variety. Someone suggests melting snow into ice cream, mixing in sugar, if they have any. The result is a slushy mess, but it earns chuckles. Another soldier pretends his sardine tin is gourmet cuisine, describing it aloud with the pomp of a restaurant waiter. Tonight, gentlemen, we serve the finest frozen fish in Norway. Everyone applauds. For a few minutes, the igloo becomes a theater, and hunger becomes a punchline. Yet, when the jokes fade and the candles burn low, you lie back in your fur bag, stomach still empty. The cold is survivable thanks to snow walls and reindeer skins, but hunger is harder to silence. You drift toward uneasy sleep, dreaming of tables laden with bread, butter, steaming meat. You wake to reality. Frozen tins, hard loaves, bitter barley water. Still, you tell yourself you're alive, and that alone is victory enough for tonight. When the food runs low and the nights feel endless, the dogs become your unexpected companions. The German Gebirgsjäger didn't just rely on their rifles and shovels. They relied on sled dogs to haul supplies across snowfields where trucks sank uselessly and horses froze stiff. Thick-furred huskies, with eyes that glowed blue or amber in candlelight, carried more than gear, they carried morale. At first, you're wary of them. Their breath steams in heavy clouds, their fur stiff with frost, and their howls at night echo like wolves circling the camp. But spend enough time in the Arctic, and you realize these animals know the land far better than you. When the wind erases the trail and snow blinds your sight, the dogs still pull forward, heads low, paws steady, as if the white wilderness whispers directions only they can hear. You begin to notice a pattern at night. When you crawl into your igloo or tunnel, the dogs curl up outside, tails wrapped over noses, forming tight balls of warmth. Sometimes one creeps closer, pressing against your side. At first you push it away, worried about fleas or smell, but soon you give in. The shared heat is undeniable. One night you wake with a husky's back pressed against yours, its fur damp but radiating warmth like a living stove. You smile in the dark. Soldiers and animals alike, both surviving by instinct. Quirky habits emerge. Some men sneak scraps of frozen bread to their dogs, even when food is scarce. Others argue over which animal pulls hardest, betting tins of sardines on sled races across camp. One soldier ties a red rag to his husky's collar, calling him the general. and insists the dog outranks half the unit. Laughter ripples through the igloos, because, in truth, the dogs often feel more reliable than the men giving orders. Historians still argue whether the German army truly understood how vital these dogs were. Some reports suggest sled teams were underfed and overworked, seen as expendable tools. Others describe them as treasured assets, carefully fed and protected. From your perspective, the truth is clear. Without them, half the supplies would never reach their destinations, and many soldiers would have perished in storms. At night, the bond deepens. After a long march, when your bones ache and your reindeer skin bag feels too thin, you whistle softly and a dog pads closer. It circles twice, then flops down, pressing against your legs. Its breath fogs the air, steady and rhythmic. You drift into sleep with fur brushing your boots, comforted by the heartbeat of another creature sharing the same fragile warmth. Of course, not all nights are so gentle. Sometimes the dogs howl in unison, their voices piercing the silence. The sound rattles nerves, making men grip rifles, convinced it signals enemies nearby. More often, it's nothing but instinct, dogs singing to the moon, or to each other, or maybe to something only they sense. One soldier swears the howling predicts blizzards. Another insists it means reindeer herds are near. Nobody knows for sure, but every time the chorus rises, conversation falls silent. The sound reminds everyone how thin the line is between human and wilderness. A quirky incident still makes you chuckle. One soldier, half asleep, mistakes a husky creeping into the igloo for an intruder. He lunges, wrestling the animal in the dark, until a candle flares and reveals the dog wagging its tail, delighted at the attention. The camp roars with laughter, dubbing the soldier wolf slayer. For weeks afterward, he blushes whenever the dog trots by. Historians debate whether dogs truly shared igloos with men or whether such tales were exaggerations. But memory tells you plainly, yes, they did. In the coldest nights, animals and soldiers blurred into the same circle of survival. Their bodies pressed together under domes of snow. During the day, the dogs become tireless workers. Sleds creak under loads of ammunition, firewood, even the occasional wounded comrade. Watching them pull is humbling. Their paws dig deep, their shoulders ripple with strength, and they never complain. You learn quickly that shouting doesn't drive them forward, but encouragement does. A kind word, a pat on the flank, and the sled moves smoother than any command barked in German. Quirky rituals develop around feeding. When meat scraps appear, men toss them into the snow, letting the pack dive in. The frenzy is brief, but fierce. Fur flying, teeth snapping, snow churned into powder. Then it ends as quickly as it began. Dogs trotting off, licking their muzzles, tails wagging. The soldiers watch, oddly entertained, as though witnessing theater staged by nature itself. You realize the dogs are more than beasts of burden. They're teachers. Watching them, you learn how to conserve energy, how to curl tight to trap warmth, how to move steadily without wasting breath. In their resilience, you see a mirror of what you must become, an animal adapted to cold, living by instinct and rhythm. One night, a blizzard buries the camp so deep that only the tips of igloo vents remain visible. You lie inside, half asleep, when you hear scratching. A dog, trapped outside, is digging toward you. Soon, Snow crumbles at the entrance, and its snout pushes through. You laugh, pulling it inside. It shakes violently, spraying frost across the dome, then settles at your feet. Together, you wait out the storm, two creatures sharing a pocket of borrowed warmth. Historians still puzzle over whether these bonds between soldiers and sled dogs softened the harshness of the Arctic campaign, or whether they were simply brief distractions from hunger and fear. But you know the truth from experience. Without the dogs, nights would have been longer, colder, and lonelier as you drift into sleep. You hear the steady breathing of men and animals alike. The igloo hums with life-human snores, canine sighs, the faint crackle of a dying candle. Outside, the Arctic howls, but inside, you've found a fragile sanctuary stitched together by snow, fur, and friendship. The first time you wake to find the world gone. It's not an enemy attack, it's the storm. A blizzard rolls down from the mountains overnight, and by morning the camp has vanished under a quilt of white. You push against the igloo wall, and it barely gives. Only the faint glow of daylight through the snow tells you which way is up. For a terrifying moment, you wonder if you've been buried alive. Crawling out through the narrow entrance is like tunneling through a grave. Snow pours in as you wriggle forward, boots kicking, hands clawing, until you burst out into a storm so thick you can't see 3 steps ahead. The wind slams your face like iron, biting through every layer. It roars in your ears, drowning out everything, and snowflakes sting like thrown sand. Around you, the others emerge, one by one, blinking, covered in white, looking like ghosts clawing out of the earth. The camp is gone. No tents, no gear, no landmarks, only smoking vents sticking up here and there. Faint wisps betraying where igloos lie hidden under drifts. You realize the storm has erased everything. It's humbling, frightening, and, in a strange way, awe-inspiring. The Arctic doesn't just test you, it swallows you whole when it chooses. Historians still debate how effective these blizzards were in shaping strategy. Some argue they stalled whole operations, erasing trails and positions so completely that units lost each other. Others suggest seasoned troops used the storms as cover, slipping unseen past enemy patrols. From your perspective, there's no debate. Storms are the true commanders here. Orders mean nothing when the world itself decides to bury you. Quirky details emerge during these whiteouts. Men poke sticks up through their igloos before sleeping, so if snow piles too high overnight, they'll still have a vent for air. Others tie cords from one shelter to another, a lifeline in case the storm blinds them. You find yourself clutching one of these cords, groping from igloo to igloo, the rope your only tether in a sea of white. Without it, you'd wander in circles until exhaustion claimed you. Inside, the igloo becomes both refuge and prison. The wind howls outside like 1,000 wolves, but in here, it's muffled to a low moan. The walls vibrate faintly with each gust, snow dust drifting from seams. You huddle with comrades, candles flickering, reindeer skins pulled high. Conversation dies, replaced by silence, punctuated only by the storm's fury. In those hours, you feel small, just another creature hiding in a burrow, waiting for nature to relent. But waiting breeds creativity. Some men turn the confinement into games, carving dice from scraps, playing endless rounds in candlelight. Others sing quietly, voices blending with the storm outside, as though answering it. One man sharpens his knife obsessively. Another writes letters by stub of wax, words shaky from the cold. You scrawl your own note, knowing it may never reach home, but the act itself steadies your mind. Quirky stories abound. A soldier swears he heard the storm whisper his name. Another claims he saw shapes moving in the white parade of frozen figures, marching endlessly. The mind plays tricks when sight and sound are stolen. You begin to wonder if the Arctic enjoys taunting you, feeding hallucinations into exhausted brains. Historians still argue whether these tales were stress-borne illusions or glimpses of a deeper psychological toll. Either way, they're real enough in the moment to chill you more than the wind. The dogs, usually restless, curl silently during storms, tails over noses, conserving every ounce of heat. Their stillness unnerves you. If even the animals surrender to waiting, you know better than to fight. Survival here is patience, not defiance. Yet storms also bring a strange kind of comfort. When the wind screams loudest, you know no patrols are moving, no battles raging. The enemy is hidden as surely as you are. In those hours, you almost feel invisible, cloaked by snow itself. It's the closest thing to peace you'll find on this front. Emerging afterward is always shocking. The storm fades, the sky clears, and suddenly the world gleams blinding white. Mountains glisten, valleys shine, and every trace of yesterday is erased. Footprints, sled tracks, supply caches, all gone. It feels like waking into a dream, a reset button pressed by the Arctic itself. You squint at the sun, low on the horizon, disoriented, trying to remember where camp even stood. The quirky aftermath is almost comical. Men dig furiously, hunting for buried rifles, packs, even comrades who slept too deep. Someone uncovers a helmet frozen in ice. Another pulls up a sled. The camp becomes a frantic excavation, laughter and curses mingling as treasures are unearthed. One soldier emerges, holding his frozen bread loaf aloft like a relic, shouting, "Still edible." The cheer that follows is louder than any drill sergeant's bark. Historians still question whether soldiers admired or feared these storms more. Diaries describe them with awe, even reverence, as if the blizzards were living beings. You understand why. They strip you bare, humble you, then let you begin again. In a war defined by orders and control, here is a force no general can command. That night, as you curl back into your reindeer skin, you glance at the igloo walls, thicker now from the storm's gift. The silence outside feels deeper, calmer. You close your eyes, knowing tomorrow the snow might rage again. But for now, you've survived another blizzard, another test, and survival in this land is victory enough. The storm clears, and for once, the Arctic shows you its softer face. You crawl out of the igloo into a silence so complete it feels sacred. The snowfield stretches unbroken in every direction, glowing under the pale light of a half moon. And then, like some magician's trick, the sky itself begins to move. Curtains of green ripple across the darkness, twisting, folding, shimmering. It's the aurora, and even hardened soldiers drop their rifles for a moment. Standing slack-jawed, like children, at their first fireworks. You've seen fire before, bombs and flares, but nothing like this. The aurora doesn't explode, it dances. A sheet of emerald arcs overhead, streaked with purple veins, sliding like silk in a wind you cannot hear. It bends low, brushes the mountains, then folds back into the heavens. Some of the men whisper prayers, others whistle, as if calling to it. You just stare, breath frozen in your lungs, convinced that the sky has opened to remind you that beauty still exists, even in a world wrapped in war. The radio posts become peculiar places on these nights. The Gebirgsjäger rely on crackling sets to link scattered units, and men sit hunched over dials, listening to voices fade in and out like ghosts. But when the aurora is strong, the signals bend strangely. Messages stutter, echo, or vanish completely. Static hisses like whispers from another planet. Historians still argue about how much the aurora interfered with communications in the Arctic campaign. But the soldiers didn't need textbooks to know something was happening. They joked that the northern lights were censoring their messages, deciding what news could pass through the frozen air. Quirky details make the nights unforgettable. One soldier swears he hears music in the static, a faint melody hiding under the crackle. Another insists the lights themselves hum softly, a cosmic tune only the sleepless can hear. You press your ear against the set, straining, and for a moment you almost believe it's some rhythm pulsing in the sky above. Is it your imagination? Or does the Arctic truly sing? The aurora becomes both a distraction and a comfort. Sentinels standing guard often tilt their heads upward, forgetting the dark valleys where enemies might lurk. Officers scold them, but even officers glance skyward when they think nobody is looking. How could they not? When war strips life to hunger and frostbite, the heavens suddenly spilling green fire feels like a gift, but not all agree on what the lights mean. Superstition weaves quickly through the camp. Some soldiers say the aurora are the souls of the dead dancing over the battlefield. Others claim they are omens of coming battles, the sky painting warnings for those wise enough to read them. A few insist they are harmless illusions, nothing but physics. Historians still debate whether such beliefs truly took hold or whether later memoirs exaggerated them. Either way, the arguments are real in the moment, whispered fiercely under flickering skies. Quirky competitions spring up among the watchers. Who can spot the first burst of purple? Who can predict when the lights will fade? Men cheer like gamblers when their guesses prove right. Someone even carves a tally into his rifle stock, marking each night the aurora appears. He calls it his northern calendar and swears it keeps him sane in the endless dark. The dogs react differently. Some sit quietly, ears pricked, staring at the sky as though they understand. Others howl, their voices rising in eerie harmony with the shifting light. Their cries echo down the valleys, blending with the radio's static, making the whole night feel unearthly. You shiver, not from cold this time, but from the sense that you're caught between worlds, one of men and war, the other of sky and silence. You remember standing watch one particular night, rifle slung over your shoulder, when the aurora suddenly arched directly overhead. It felt close enough to touch, ribbons of light streaming like rivers. For a heartbeat, you forgot the rifle, the cold, the orders. You just stared upward, convinced the universe itself was speaking. When your comrade nudged you, reminding you to scan the ridge, you laughed quietly. How could anyone look at a ridge when the sky itself was on fire? And then reality intrudes, as it always does. The radio crackles back to life, distorted but urgent. A patrol reports movement near the valley floor. Soviet scouts, perhaps, or shadows misread in the storm's aftermath. The aurora keeps dancing as rifles are checked, orders barked, and men trudge toward positions. It's a cruel juxtaposition, the most beautiful sight you've ever seen, and the reminder that even here, in the North's Cathedral of Light, war never loosens its grip. Still, as you crawl back into your igloo later, snow crunching under boots, you keep glancing up. The aurora swirls one last time before fading into darkness, leaving only stars behind. You lie down in your reindeer skin bag, listening to the radio hum, wondering if those lights were meant for you or if they simply shine for themselves, indifferent to men below. Sleep becomes its own battleground. You'd think exhaustion alone would carry you into oblivion, but in the Arctic, rest is never simple. The cold seeps into every joint, the wind shrieks outside, and your stomach groans from half-empty meals. Still, you try, because without sleep, your body fails faster than any rifle bullet. Inside the igloos, soldiers turn rest into a kind of competition. Someone suggests a wager one night, who can stay asleep the longest without waking up from shivers. At first, it's a joke, just a way to pass the time. But quickly it becomes serious. A contest repeated night after night. Bragging rights turning into a strange kind of currency. I lasted 4 hours straight. One man crows. No way, another counters. I heard you tossing after 2. Arguments break out, with others stepping in as referees. In a place where medals are rare and comfort rarer, even the ability to sleep turns into a badge of honor. You join in, pulling your reindeer skin tighter, determined to outlast the others. The rules are simple. Crawl into your bag, blow out the candle, and see who lasts longest before stirring. There's no prize but pride, yet it matters. In a world where war strips everything else away, claiming you can sleep through the cold feels like reclaiming a sliver of control. Historians still debate whether such contests actually happened, or if they were exaggerations in soldiers' memoirs. But you remember clearly the whispers, the muffled laughter, the bets sealed with frozen sardine tins. And in a way, whether the stories were true or not doesn't matter. The Arctic demanded entertainment, and sleep, even in its most basic form, became a game worth playing. Quirky methods develop quickly. One soldier swears by lining his igloo wall with empty ration tins, claiming the faint heat from his body reflects back at him. Another insists that if you stuff straw inside your boots and keep them in your bag, you trap extra warmth. Others hum lullabies softly, or count how many times the snow drips from the ceiling before they drift off. You find your own rhythm rocking slightly, almost like a child, until warmth spreads and sleep edges close. But sleep is fickle here. Dreams arrive strange, shaped by hunger and cold. One night you dream of sitting at a long wooden table back home, bread steaming in baskets, butter soft and golden. You wake, biting your lip, half convinced the food was real. Another night, you wander in dream through endless white cathedrals, snow arches glittering above, your comrades' snores echoing like choir songs. Sometimes the dreams are so vivid you struggle to separate them from waking. The officers, of course, grumble about this obsession with sleep. They remind you that fatigue is weakness, that vigilance must never slip, but they to steal moments, curling into skins, chasing warmth and silence. No soldier can fight exhaustion forever. The Arctic teaches you that rest is not indulgence, it's survival. And then there are the snores. Whole igloos hum with them, deep rumbles and sharp whistles bouncing off icy walls. Some men snort awake, startling themselves, then immediately drift back down. The racket becomes its own kind of lullaby, a rhythm so constant that silence feels unnerving. Once, when one snorer was transferred to another shelter, the men left behind struggled to fall asleep without his familiar rumble. They joked about sneaking him back, like borrowing a neighbor's gramophone. Quirky nicknames grow from these contests. One soldier, who always falls asleep first, becomes the hibernating bear. Another, who thrashes so violently that he breaks his igloo wall twice, earns the name Earthquake. You yourself are called the owl because you stay awake long after others fade, eyes wide, listening to the storm. The names stick, carrying a humor that lightens even the darkest hours. Historians still argue whether soldiers in the Arctic truly got better sleep in igloos than in canvas tents. Some sources say the snow walls insulated sound and cold, giving men deeper rest. Others argue that the cramped, damp spaces ruined sleep rather than helped. But from your experience, the igloo always wins. The dome muffles the wind, traps a little warmth, and tricks your body into believing it's safe enough to let go. Even if only for an hour, the reprieve feels priceless. The sleep contests continue through winter. Some men boast records of 6 or 7 hours, though everyone suspects exaggeration. Others admit they never last more than 2 before shivers shake them awake. But all agree on one thing: the nights are easier with a goal. Competing over sleep, laughing about snores, trading tricks, it keeps despair at bay. One night, after a particularly brutal storm, you drift into the deepest rest yet. The candle stub gutters out. The igloo glows faintly in moonlight seeping through the vent, and your comrades settle around you. Their snores weave a chorus. Your reindeer skin hugs tight, and exhaustion carries you away. Hours later, you wake to someone shaking your shoulder. "You won," he whispers, grinning. Out cold the whole night, you smile groggily, pride warming you more than the fur. In truth, there's no prize but survival. Still, you savor the victory, because in this frozen world, even sleep can feel like a triumph. And as you curl back down into the skin, you wonder what tomorrow's contest will bring in. Whether you'll dream again of warm kitchens and soft beds, or of snow domes glowing like cathedrals under flickering northern skies. By now, you've learned to carve snow into homes, sleep through storms, and even joke about frozen sardines. But one truth never fades: the enemy is close, just beyond those silent ridges. The Arctic may feel like another planet, but the war still bleeds into this frozen stage. Every patrol reminds you, every creak of ice might be more than the wind. You march out at dusker, what passes for dusk here, when the sky glows a dim blue that never seems to end. Snow crunches under boots, Rifles sling heavy across shoulders, and breath puffs out like smoke signals. The silence feels sharp, as though every sound will carry for miles. The sergeant gestures with 2 fingers, and you scatter into formation, weaving carefully through valleys where shadows stretch long. Somewhere out there, Soviet scouts might be doing the same. The eerie part is how the Arctic disguises everything. Tracks vanish within minutes under drifting snow. Footprints blur, sled trails dissolve, and even landmarks vanish in storms. You find yourself squinting at ridges, wondering if a dark speck is a rock or a man. One soldier swears he saw movement ahead just a flicker, but when you rush forward, there's nothing. Only wind, sculpting snow into shapes that mimic figures. Historians still argue how often these patrols actually encountered enemies, and how often they were simply chasing ghosts. From your perspective, the Arctic itself feels like the fiercest opponent, yet the possibility of an ambush keeps nerves strung tight. You learn to walk lighter, rifles ready, fingers numb but alert. Sometimes you crouch in silence for hours, listening, ears pricked for crunches not made by your squad. And sometimes you swear you hear them, the faint scrape of skis across snow, the echo of distant voices carried on wind. Is it real, or is the storm taunting you again? Quirky rituals develop among the men. One comrade insists on carrying a small bell in his pocket, shaking it 3 times before patrols to ward off unlucky meetings. Another taps the butt of his rifle against his boot 3 times, claiming it brings stealth. Nobody laughs anymore. In a land where frostbite can take your toes overnight, superstition feels no stranger than physics. The igloo camp itself adapts. Entrances face inward, forming rough circles so guards can scan the outer edges more easily. Snow tunnels double as hiding places, where rifles lie propped and ready. Some men carve slits into igloo walls, tiny loopholes to poke barrels through should shadows appear in the storm. You crawl past one and shake your head at the absurdities. No castles prepared for battle. Yet, absurd or not, you know it may save lives. There are stories whispered of Soviet patrols slipping dangerously close, their skis cutting across frozen lakes at night, their white coats blending perfectly with drifts. Some soldiers claim to have exchanged fire in brief flashes before both sides vanished back into the storm. Others doubt these tales, saying nerves played tricks. Historians still debate the scale of such Arctic skirmishes. Were they constant cat-and-mouse games, or rare, exaggerated memories? You only know the feeling in your gut that someone out there is always watching. Quirky encounters happen too. One patrol stumbles across a half-buried Soviet supply sled, abandoned in the snow. The men dig it out with frozen fingers, half expecting an ambush. Instead, they find tins of food, a few tools, even a fur hat. They divide the haul, chewing gratefully on whatever's edible, laughing at the absurd luck. Someone dons the hat, prancing around camp, pretending to be a Soviet general. For one night, the enemy becomes a costume rather than a threat, yet danger never fully lifts. One evening, while standing watch, you hear a distant crack. Not snow shifting, not ice-splitting rifle fire. A single shot echoing through the valley. Everyone freezes, scanning the horizon. Nothing stirs. No lights, no movement. The shot fades into silence as if it never happened. Some say it was just ice fracturing. Others insist scouts are out there testing your nerves. You never learn the truth, and the uncertainty gnaws worse than certainty ever could. Inside the igloo, afterward, men whisper about what they'd do if Soviets struck the camp. Some talk bravely of defending to the last. Others quietly admit they'd rather vanish into snow tunnels, letting nature hide them. You lie in your bag, listening, realizing war here is less about battles and more about waiting for a storm, for hunger, for a shadow to become real. Historians still argue whether the Arctic front was decisive or merely a sideshow of larger battles elsewhere. But for you, there's no question. Every patrol, every creak in the night, every half-heard shot makes survival its own war. Maybe the maps don't show great clashes here, but the tension lives in every heartbeat, and yet, even amid nerves, humor sneaks through. One soldier, after a long, silent patrol, bursts into camp, claiming he chased 3 Soviet ghosts only to reveal they were actually startled reindeer. The men laugh until their sides ache, the fear dissolving briefly into warmth. Quirky mistakes like that remind you that sometimes survival depends less on rifles and more on the ability to laugh at yourself in the middle of nowhere. That night, as you drift off, you still half expect the enemy to be waiting just outside the igloo. But instead, it's only the wind howling across empty valleys. You close your eyes, gripping your rifle close, dreaming of shadows moving silently across snow. War in the Arctic is like that, always half real, half imagined. And somehow, both are equally dangerous. The igloos and tunnels give you a measure of warmth, but human ingenuity doesn't stop there. Comfort, if you can even call it that, becomes an obsession. You learn quickly that the difference between misery and survival often comes down to fire, smoke, and a handful of stolen tricks with tin and snow. It begins with a single sardine tin, empty after a meager meal. A comrade stares at it thoughtfully, muttering about how it could be turned into a stove. At first, you laugh. What good is a flimsy tin in a land where even trees seem afraid to grow? But then he punches holes in the sides with a bayonet, packs the bottom with shavings and scraps, and lights it with the stub of a candle. To your amazement, a tiny flame flickers inside, barely enough to boil a mouthful of snow. Still, it works. For one night, you sip warm water instead of crunching on ice, and it feels like a miracle. Word spreads quickly. Soon the camp becomes a laboratory of improvisation. Soldiers build stoves from cans, mess tins, even old shell casings. Some burn bits of reindeer dung. Others twist dry moss into ropes, lighting them like fuses. The smell is atrocious, but no one complains when warmth creeps into frozen fingers. You sit in the glow of these makeshift stoves, watching the walls of the igloo shimmer with soot stains, and you realize survival here isn't about brute strength. It's about creativity, about squeezing fire from nothing. Quirky accidents become stories retold with laughter. One soldier builds his stove too close to the wall, and by morning, half his igloo has melted into a puddle. He emerges, soaked, furious, while the others howl with glee, dubbing him the arsonist. Another, too ambitious, tries building a chimney from hollowed branches. It works for about 10 minutes, until smoke fills the dome, sending men coughing into the snow. The camp teases him as the master engineer. Though everyone admits his idea wasn't entirely mad, historians still debate whether such improvised stoves were officially encouraged or discouraged. Some accounts claim officers ordered men not to risk weakening igloos with smoke holes. Others suggest field manuals were quietly updated with diagrams of tin can heaters. The truth, as always, lies between. In the Arctic, no soldier waits for permission to find warmth. Orders crumble quickly when frost creeps into bones. You develop rituals around fire. Someone always volunteers to strike the first spark, shielding it with cupped hands, coaxing it to life as though nurturing a child. Others gather close, breathless, waiting for the flame to catch. When it does, a cheer rises quiet. For a few minutes, the war disappears. There is only light, warmth, and the miracle of steam rising from SNOWMELT. Quirky experiments follow. A soldier sprinkles coffee substitute directly into the melting snow, claiming it saves time. The result tastes like burnt mud, but he insists it's genius. Another roasts pine cones in the flame, chewing the softened seeds with noisy satisfaction. You try adding hard biscuit crumbs into the boiling tin, creating a paste that sticks to your ribs for hours. Nobody calls it delicious, but nobody leaves a drop behind. Smoke becomes both blessing and curse. The tiny fires leave black smudges across ceilings, icicles dripping with soot. Some men draw shapes in it, sketching crude faces or writing names of towns back home. Others worry about suffocation, carving vents into walls to let fumes escape. You find yourself lying awake, staring at the flickering shadow of smoke curling upward, wondering if it will choke you before morning. Still, you light the fire again the next night. Better risk smoke than freeze in silence. The sound of crackling becomes comfort itself. Outside, the wind moans endlessly, but inside, the faint hiss of snow boiling is a lullaby. You sit with comrades, mugs in hand, steam curling around your faces. Conversation drifts lazily, sometimes jokes, sometimes memories, sometimes silence. The fire makes everything slower, softer, easier. You marvel at how such a small flame can hold back so much darkness. Historians still puzzle over whether these improvised stoves truly made the difference in Arctic survival, or whether igloos alone were enough. Some argue that every degree mattered, that one candle or one flame could decide who lived through the night. Others suggest the fires were more symbolic than practical, tokens of civilization clung to in a land that wanted men to be animals. Either way, you know the truth in your bones. The flame mattered. Without it, despair crept in. With it, even watery barley brew tasted like hope. One evening, after a long patrol, you return to find a comrade proudly tending his stove. He's balanced two tins together, one inverted over the other, creating a sort of miniature furnace. Snow melts faster, steam rising in steady columns. He grins like a child showing off a toy. You clap him on the shoulder, grateful beyond words. Later, as you sip from your mug, you realize you'll never forget this moment. Not battles, not orders, but the sight of a friend smiling at a tin can fire in the Arctic night. The quirky part: These tiny stoves make igloos smell different. Each night, the camp holds a medley of scents: burning moss, singed hair, roasted pine, melted fat. Some odors are foul, others oddly comforting. You begin to recognize whose igloo you're entering by scent alone. One comrade's shelter always smells faintly of fish oil. Another's reeks of scorched bark. Yours smells mostly of damp fur and soot. Nobody minds. In a world without kitchens, every smell is a reminder that warmth still exists. The fire also changes how you think of time. Before, the days blended endlessly into one another. No sun to mark the hours. But now, you measure evenings by how long the flame lasts. When it gutters low, you know it's time to curl deeper into your skin bag. When it flares high, you stay awake, savoring the rare luxury of heat. The candle clock has been replaced by the stove clock, ticking in flames rather than hands. And so, in the Arctic, fire is no longer just fire. It's invention, it's camaraderie, it's rebellion against the cold. Each spark feels like defiance, a tiny declaration that men will not surrender to snow. You realize that in this frozen war, rifles and bombs matter less than the quiet victory of making warmth from nothing. That night, as you watch the soot-stained ceiling shimmer in the glow of a tin can flame, you feel an odd gratitude. 4 sardine tins, 4 bayonets turned into tools, for the laughter that follows melted igloos and smoky disasters. You curl into your reindeer skin, the fire hissing softly, and for a moment you forget the Arctic outside. In the dance of shadows, in the hush of snow, you find the closest thing to peace this war will ever offer. If the snow taught you to build and the sardine tins taught you to improvise, it's the same people, the reindeer herders of the North, who teach you to truly survive. At first, the Gebergster march through their lands with the same stiff arrogance they carry everywhere. Soldiers from the Alps, trained in mountains, used to being called elite. But here in the Arctic, pride freezes faster than coffee substitute. The locals move through the landscape like it's their living room, and before long, you realize that watching them is worth more than any manual the Reich ever printed. They come quietly, dressed in furs, stitched so cleverly that no wind can sneak through. Their boots are soft leather, lined with hay or moss, keeping feet dry where yours ache in wool socks and stiff boots. Their sleds glide smoothly over snow, while your men stumble knee-deep, cursing every step. A Sami man may pause, glance at you, and shake his head with a grin that says more than words, "You're strong." But strength alone won't save you here. The first lesson is about igloos. Yes, your squad already builds them, but the Sami laugh at your crude angles and collapsing domes. They show you how to cut blocks with curved edges, how to tilt them inward so gravity holds everything tight. Their domes rise smoother, firmer, warmer. They explain how to carve a cold trap entrance antechamber lower than the floor inside, so cold air sinks there, leaving the main chamber warmer. You try it, and for the first time, the igloo feels not just survivable, but comfortable. Then there's the reindeer gear. You already have the skins, heavy and musky, but the Sami show you finer tricks. They teach you to sew 2 hides together into a double-layer bag, fur facing inward on both sides, turning it into a furnace of trapped heat. They show how to bind fur boots with cords of sinew, tighter than laces, keeping snow from creeping in. One woman demonstrates sewing patterns with bone needles, so fine they could pierce leather without tearing. You watch in awe, realizing your own gear military issue. Polished and precise looks clumsy, compared to centuries of trial and error by people who have lived here forever. Quirky customs catch your attention. The Sami use dried reindeer tendons, not just for stitching, but for chewing, swearing it strengthens teeth and warms the jaw. Soldiers try it, half in jest, and some even develop the habit, gnawing tendons like tobacco. Another time you see a herder toss snow into a pot without hesitation. When you flinch, worried about dirt, he chuckles. It's clean, cleaner than your canteen. He's right. Arctic snow melts into water, clear enough to see your reflection. Historians still debate the depth of German-Sami cooperation during the war. Some accounts insist the Sami resisted, offering little but disdain. Others describe moments of quiet assistance, guides leading patrols, herders selling pelts, women mending gear. In your experience, it's less about loyalty to one army or another, more about pragmatism. The Sami live here. They know the cold kills without politics. Helping you, at least a little, means fewer frozen bodies in their valleys. One evening, a herder teaches you how to build a fire pit directly in the snow. You expect flames to melt everything instantly, but he packs the base with thick branches, then lays blocks of snow as a window. The fire burns steady, the snow wall glowing without collapsing. You sit close, amazed at the balance, fire and snow coexisting, each shaping the other. You can't help but think it's a metaphor for survival. Here contradictions, balanced carefully. Collapse, always one wrong move away. The quirky detail. The Sami often sleeps sitting upright, wrapped in hides, heads resting on their knees. They claim it conserves heat and keeps the body ready to move at dawn. Some of your comrades try it, only to topple sideways, groaning. Laughter fills the igloo, but the lesson lingers. These people survive, not because they are stronger, but because they've learned how to bend with the land instead of fighting it. There's also a lesson in food. Where you gnaw stale bread and frozen sardines, they carry dried reindeer meat. You taste it, once salty, tangy, unlike anything back home, and it lingers on your tongue like fuel. They explain that fat is the real currency here, not sugar or starch. Without it, your body burns out. Soldiers nod solemnly, realizing that in all their supply lists and rations, the locals knew something the quartermasters didn't. Historians still argue whether German troops adopted these foods widely or merely sampled them, but you know firsthand, one bite of reindeer cheese fuels you longer than a whole tin of barley coffee. Survival often hides in flavors the outside world finds strange. A quirky exchange sticks with you. One Sami elder, watching you struggle to tie snowshoes, takes them from your hands, adjusts the cords with a flick, and hands them back. He says something in his language. Your comrade translates roughly, "Snow is your friend if you walk like it." You repeat it silently as you trudge across drifts, learning to step lightly, weight spread wide. For the first time, the snow doesn't feel like an enemy dragging you down. Back in the igloo, you and the others whisper about what you've learned. Pride prickles, but gratitude outweighs it. These people without medals or ranks, hold secrets that keep you alive. You realize war here isn't just armies clashing, it's ancient knowledge meeting modern arrogance. And the ancient knowledge always wins. Later, as you lie in your reindeer skin, candle guttering low, you think about how strange it is. German mountain troops, trained in the Alps, now copying the habits of nomads whose lives barely touched the modern world. And yet you feel no shame, only respect. Because here, in the land of endless night, survival has no uniform. It only has wisdom, passed hand to hand, hide to hide, fire to fire. You drift into sleep with that thought, grateful for the warmth of skins, the strength of igloo walls, and the quiet lessons whispered by people who have lived with snow longer than empires have ruled. You pull your gloves off with stiff fingers, fumbling for the stub of pencil in your pocket. Around you, men are already scratching words onto scraps of paper, envelopes creased and smudged, the ink freezing on the nibs of fountain pens. It is letter writing time, one of the strangest rituals in the Arctic. Outside, storms howl and rifles lie stacked. But inside the igloo, a quiet descendage man hunched in his fur bag, carving thoughts into pages that may or may not survive the journey home. You prop the paper against your knee, breathing on it to soften the fibers. The first words come slowly, dear. And then you pause. The cold stiffens your wrist, the pencil dulls, and you wonder what to say. Do you describe the snow tunnels, the igloos glowing with candles, the dogs curled like guardians at your feet? Or do you write only about the food, the longing, the hope of warmer days? Every soldier wrestles with this choice. How much truth to send home, and how much to spare the ones waiting? The quirky detail is that ink freezes. Men tuck their pens into armpits or under reindeer skins, trying to thaw them enough to flow. You hear curses muttered every few minutes, lines broken mid-sentence, words reduced to jagged scratches. One man gives up entirely, switching to charcoal from a burned twig. Another licks the tip of his pencil, only to grimace as his tongue sticks. You laugh quietly, because laughter is easier than despair. Historians still argue about how reliable the mail was in the far north. Some say letters arrive months late, if at all, bundled together in ragged sacks. Others claim field posts worked tirelessly, ensuring soldiers at least had the illusion of connection. What you know is this: you write, not because you expect the letter to arrive, but because writing itself keeps you tethered. The act of setting words on paper reminds you that another world still exists beyond the snow. Quirky habits grow from this ritual. Some men trade paper since supplies are scarce. Cigarette wrappers become stationery, margins filled with tiny script. Others tear labels from ration tins, writing across grease stains. A few sketch instead of writing crude drawings of igloos, dogs, mountains, hoping pictures will speak when words freeze. You yourself sketch a snow tunnel, candle flickering inside. Though you know your family might never understand the scale, there's a moment one evening when silence falls heavier than usual. A comrade reads his letter aloud, voice trembling. He speaks of his daughter's birthday, of a cake he can't attend, of the smell of cinnamon in his wife's kitchen. The igloo glows with candlelight, and for a heartbeat, you can almost smell it too. When he finishes, nobody speaks. The war, the the cold, the darkness, all of it presses closer. And yet, sharing that letter feels like defiance. Historians debate whether soldiers censored themselves in these notes or poured truth onto the page. You suspect both. Some write cheerful lies, painting the Arctic as a snowy holiday, complete with cozy huts and friendly dogs. Others confess the harshness, their words blunt as frost. Both are survival strategies, shielding loved ones from worry, or unburdening hearts into paper that might never be read. Quirky stories circulate about lost letters. One man swears his note blew away in a storm, only to find it weeks later, frozen to the side of an igloo. Another insists a Sami herder returned a dropped letter, carried in his pouch for days. Whether true or not, these tales give the camp something to cling to, the hope that words, like people, sometimes find their way home against impossible odds. You finish your own letter slowly, fingers numb, words crooked. We are managing, you write, though what you mean is, we are enduring. You add a joke about snowmen as comrades, then close with hope. Hope, after all, is the only currency worth mailing. You fold the paper carefully, slip it into an envelope that looks ready to crumble, and hand it to the officer who collects them in a battered SATCHEL. Later. You wonder whether your letter will ever leave Norway. Perhaps it will sit in some depot until spring. Perhaps it will be lost in a storm. Or perhaps, months from now, someone you love will open it in a warm kitchen, steam rising from a cup, and for a few minutes, they will hear your voice echoing across the miles of snow. Inside the igloo, the ritual continues. Men whisper their words, scratch their pencils, sigh over broken nibs. Some clutch the paper to their chests as if hugging family. Others seal theirs quickly, unwilling to linger. You lie back in your reindeer skin, candle flickering, listening to the rustle of paper. It is the sound of men refusing to be swallowed by snow. Historians still argue whether such letters are reliable sources for understanding the Arctic War. Were they too filtered by censorship, too clouded by longing, too fragile to trust? Perhaps, but in this moment, writing feels truer than any report. It is your heart pressed into paper, a lifeline stretched across silence before sleep. You touch the stub of pencil still in your pocket. It feels heavier than your rifle, more important than your rations. Because in the Arctic, a single word written, mailed, maybe delivered, can carry more warmth than any fire. The strangest thing about the Arctic isn't what you see, it's what you start to dream. Maybe it's exhaustion, or the way the endless dark bends your sense of time. But when you finally drift into sleep, the line between real and imagined thins to frost. Dreams come in flashes, white tunnels, soft blue light, faces of comrades blurred into snow. You wake, heart pounding, unsure if you're in an igloo or a dream of one. At first, the dreams feel random snatches of memory stitched together by cold. But soon they take on a pattern. The snow tunnels stretch farther each night, bending and looping into labyrinths. You walk them endlessly, hearing voices echo ahead, familiar yet distant. Sometimes the walls glow green, like the aurora. Sometimes they close in, pressing against your ribs until you can't breathe. You always wake before reaching the end. Your comrades talk about it too. The tunnels, they call them. the snow dreams. Everyone seems to have their version, some peaceful, some terrifying. One man swears he met his brother in the dream, sitting by a candle deep underground. Another insists the tunnels lead to the sea, to a frozen city built beneath the ice. You laugh, but not too loudly. You've seen enough strange beauty in this place to know that disbelief has its limits. Historians still argue about whether the phenomenon was psychological polar night madness. They call it or something deeper. Sleep deprivation, hunger, and monotony can bend any mind. But to you, the dreams feel like the Arctic itself, whispering. Maybe the land keeps memories of all who've walked it. Maybe it's trying to show you something you're too stubborn to understand. There's a quirky detail. The dreams always smell faintly of candle wax and reindeer fur. You mention it one morning, and several men nod. They've noticed the same. The mind, it seems, can't escape its own shelter. Even when wandering vast dreamscapes, it drags your igloo with you. Some nights, the dreams are gentle. You float through caverns of ice, walls rippling like glass. You feel weightless, unburdened. You think you hear music, slow, mournful, but soothing. It might be wind through cracks, or your own heartbeat, or something else entirely. You wake calm, almost happy. Other nights, though the dreams twist darker, you find yourself buried, the snow pressing on your chest, unable to move. You hear the scratching of claws, the muffled bark of a dog digging for you. You wake gasping, clawing at your fur bag, drenched in sweat that freezes almost instantly. The others share the same unease. One soldier insists the snow dreams are warnings. Another thinks they're blessings. Historians might call it folklore, but in the Arctic, folklore feels closer to fact than any radio report. You can't live this close to the edge of the world and not start believing. The edge looks back, quirky. Routines develop to keep bad dreams at bay. One man sleeps with his boots beside his head, claiming it anchors him to reality. Another scratches a tiny cross into the igloo wall before lying down. Some whisper prayers. Others mumble jokes as they drift off, hoping laughter confuses whatever spirits linger in the snow. You try counting heartbeats, but you always lose track when the wind sighs. One night, you fall into the deepest dream yet. The tunnels stretch wide, their walls glowing faintly green. You walk without fear this time. The air is warm, impossibly so. Shapes form in the ice faces, maybe 1,000 of them, blurred, kind. You realize they're soldiers, past and present, all sleeping in the snow. None are cold. None are hungry. You reach out to touch one, and warmth floods your hand. When you wake, the igloo feels different, still cold, but softer somehow. You don't tell anyone. They wouldn't believe you. Maybe you don't either. Historians debate whether such collective dreams were the result of sensory deprivation or simple storytelling. Yet, for those who lived it, it didn't matter. The dreams made the Arctic more than just a place. They made it a leva, vast white being that listened, breathed, remembered. You notice another quirk. After a while, everyone stops fearing the dreams. They become routine, even comforting. Men wake and compare them like weather reports. I dreamt of the long tunnel again. Mine had fire inside the snow. I met my mother. She was baking bread in the ice. The stories mix and overlap, turning into a shared mythology, part joke, part belief. Sometimes, in the waking hours, you catch yourself staring into the snow walls, half expecting to see them move. You tilt your candle close and swear you glimpse faint ripples, like breath beneath glass. You laugh it off, but when the candle flickers, you find yourself whispering goodnight to the wall anyway. Historians might write later that the soldiers in northern Norway suffered from isolation and exhaustion-induced hallucinations. Maybe that's true, but those same historians never lay in the Arctic silence where even thoughts seem to echo. They never saw the aurora ripple like a pulse or heard snow groan under its own weight. You begin to think the line between dream and reality isn't blurred here. It simply doesn't exist. On one rare clear morning, you crawl outside and find the snow glittering with colors faintly green and violet, like the aurora has fallen to earth. You can't help smiling. The dream, it seems, has followed you out. Maybe the Arctic, amused by your endurance, has decided to show a gentler face. Back in the igloo, you tell your comrades. They grin sleepily, pretending not to care, but you see it in their eyes, the same wonder, the same quiet fear. Because whether dreams come from exhaustion or the snow itself, they remind you all of something the war keeps trying to erase, that beauty and terror often live side by side that night. Before sleep, you place your candle in the center of the igloo and let it burn until it sputters out. Its smoke curls upward, leaving faint black whorls on the ceiling shapes that almost look like tunnels. You smile, close your eyes, and drift again into the snow's patient embrace. The snow begins to change. What was once solid as stone softens underfoot, and for the first time in months, you hear water trickling beneath the ice. It's strange, the sound feels almost obscene, like laughter in a church. Spring, or something pretending to be it, is finally creeping into northern Norway, and with it comes a new kind of hardship, the thaw. The Arctic doesn't melt gracefully. It breaks apart. Rivers burst from frozen beds, snow caves collapse, and once smooth plains turn to swamps of slush. You step outside your igloo one morning and nearly sink to your knees in wet snow. The air smells different, heavy, earthy, alive, but the change that should bring relief instead brings chaos. The first victims are the igloos. At first, the melting happens slowly, a drip here, a trickle there. Then, one morning, a man wakes with snowmelt dripping on his forehead. Another rolls over and feels his bedding soaked through. Within days, the camp transforms into a graveyard of collapsing domes. Walls sag inward, ceilings buckle, and doorways slump into puddles. Soldiers emerge from the wreckage, like moles flushed from their burrows, blinking at the pale sunlight. You try to save yours for a while, patching cracks with fresh snow, stacking ice blocks to reinforce the roof. But it's hopeless. The snow refuses to hold shape. When the sun peeks through thin clouds, the whole structure sweats and glistens, a ghost melting before your eyes. You watch, strangely emotional, as your iglooer home, your shield against the Arctic's cruelties, lowly gives way. The last candle stub flickers out, drowned by a single drop from above. Historians still debate whether soldiers welcomed the thaw or dreaded it. On paper, warmer weather meant relief. No frostbite, easier movement, longer daylight. But the truth, as always, was more complicated. The thaw brought mud, rot, and endless damp. Rifles rusted overnight, boots filled with sludge, and supply sleds stuck fast in melting snow. You trade the bite of cold for the stench of decay, and somehow it doesn't feel like a fair deal. Quirky improvisations emerge again. Soldiers stretch tent canvas over half-melted igloos, turning them into hybrid huts. Others dig trenches to redirect meltwater, calling them Arctic canals. One man, ever the optimist, builds a raft from empty fuel drums, insisting he'll sail to breakfast. When it sinks immediately, the laughter that follows. You walk through what remains of the camp, boots sinking into mud that swallows each step with a soft, wet sigh. Where your igloo once stood, there's only a ring of dirty snow and a puddle reflecting the gray sky. You crouch beside it, tracing a finger through the water. The line disappears instantly, as if the Arctic refuses to keep even that small mark. Around you, men move sluggishly, their uniforms streaked with grime, their laughter quieter now. Survival had a rhythm in winter, discipline born of necessity. The thaw breaks that rhythm, and with it, the strange peace that came from enduring the cold together. The dogs are restless too. They pace the edges of camp, sniffing at the unfamiliar earth, tugging their leads toward the open hills. A few of them have begun shedding their thick coats, leaving tufts of fur tangled in the mud like small ghosts of winter. You watch one shake himself clean and trot toward a meltwater stream, lapping greedily. He looks freer than any soldier alive. Historians still debate what the Arctic spring meant for morale among the Gebirgsjäger. Some letters home describe relief and renewed hope. Others speak of exhaustion and confusion, of soldiers more adrift in sunlight. You know how it feels. The endless night had made time simple. Survive until morning, whenever that might come. Now the days stretch long again, and the return of light exposes everything you'd hidden from yourself. Quirky new routines form. Men dry their reindeer skins over rocks, smoke curling from improvised fires built from driftwood. The camp smells of damp fur and boiling water. The tin can stoves still burn, though now they're used to cook instead of thaw. Someone experiments with making soup from melted snow, wild herbs, and the last crumbs of ration bread. It tastes terrible, but feels like triumph. Others grow quieter, staring too long at the horizon. One afternoon, a comrade turns to you and says, "Do you ever miss the dark?" You almost laugh, but the question sits heavy. You realize you do. In the dark, the world felt smaller, simpler, easier to understand. You had your igloo, your candle, your little bubble of warmth. Now the light floods everything, and with it comes the reminder of how far from home you truly are. The quirky debates return to because soldiers can't resist them. Now it's not igloos versus tents, but which season's worse, winter or spring. The camps split evenly. One group insists nothing could top the agony of frozen boots and biting wind. The other argues that mud, mosquitoes, and collapsing shelters are worse. You vote for winter, if only because it felt honest. Cold never lied. It promised suffering and kept its word. The thaw deceives it, hints at comfort, then gives you rot. Historians still argue whether the Gebirgsjäger's adaptation to the Arctic was a success story or a slow unraveling. They write about survival rates, supply lines, and tactical lessons. But never about the silence after the thaw, the moment when the snow retreats, and all that remains is the sound of dripping, dripping, dripping. You think that's the real memory the Arctic leaves behind, the soft erosion of everything human. You find yourself one evening sitting on a boulder, watching the sun sink low behind the fjord. It's strange to see it set again after so long. The sky burns gold and pink, reflecting in the pools of meltwater scattered across the valley. For a brief moment, the world looks forgiving. You hear laughter behind you, someone joking about summer coming soon, about swimming in the icy lakes. You smile, but say nothing. You know better. In the Arctic, summer is just another mask for survival. Quirky relics of winter still the camp. A half-buried snow tunnel, now collapsed into a trench. The soot-black ceiling of what was once your kitchen. A pile of frozen sardine tins glinting in sunlight. You wander through them like a museum, each piece carrying a ghost of the season gone. Here, the Arctic's cruelty feels almost gentle. It takes everything back without anger, as if reminding you it only ever loaned it in the first place. As the days grow longer, the orders come. Prepare to move. The war doesn't stop for weather. The unit will head south soon, toward terrain where mud, not snow, will be the enemy. You pack your gear, slowly refill rations, the worn reindeer skin that still smells faintly of smoke and candle wax. Before leaving, you glance one last time at the empty field where the igloos once glowed. You half expect to see their outlines return at dusk, faint domes rising from mist. But the land has erased every trace. It's as if winter never happened. Historians will later say the German Arctic garrisons were among the best prepared for extreme cold. Their lessons shaping survival manuals for decades. They'll write about snow density, reindeer fur insulation, and the efficiency of snow tunnels. But they'll miss the smaller truths, the way candlelight changed color against ice, the smell of pine in melted snow, the sound of laughter echoing in a dome of frost. The human pieces of the story will melt like everything else here. Into the background, that night the last before departure, you build a small fire outside what used to be the camp's center. The others join you quietly. Someone passes around a tin of the last barley coffee. Someone else hums a tune too soft to name. You all stare into the flames, hypnotized by their movement. The firelight reminds you of the candles that once lit your igloo, of the tiny heat that kept the cold at bay. Around you, puddles reflect the fire like dozens of miniature suns, trembling in the wind. When the flames die down, you stay a little longer, alone. The Arctic air is damp now, but still carries that faint metallic scent of snow, a promise that it will return. You know it will. You feel it in your bones, in the stillness that settles once more over the hills. You take one last breath, memorizing the sound of water dripping from melting ice, the distant bark of a dog, the quiet hum of a world thawing. And then you turn south, leaving behind the frozen night that taught you more about endurance, silence, and small joys than any battlefield ever could. The Arctic fades behind you like a long dream, cold, bright, impossible to hold. You can still feel the fur against your neck, the waxy scent of smoke, the sound of snow shifting under your boots. You think about all that the land took, and all that it quietly gave back: patience, humility, the ability to find peace in discomfort. When you close your eyes, you see the igloos again, not as shelters, but as lanterns glowing in darkness. Warm pockets of human stubbornness against an indifferent world. The faces of your comrades blur together in that light, soft with exhaustion and laughter. You remember how the wind used to moan, how the aurora rippled across the sky like silk, how even hunger could fade for a moment when you stared at that impossible beauty. Now, as the train rumbles south through fields of thawing snow, you lean your head against the cold window and smile. The Arctic taught you the oldest truth of all, that survival isn't victory over nature, it's learning to live alongside it, quietly, respectfully, without asking it to change. You drift toward sleep as the landscape blurs into twilight. Outside, the last traces of winter glimmer faintly under the sun. Inside, you carry its silence with you, a stillness so deep it hums, a calm that feels like forgiveness. Sweet dreams.